Hey, deserving listeners, we have a very special guest with us today, Ian, otherwise known as iDubbbz. And if you know him, you know him. But if you don't, he is one of the biggest YouTubers of all time.
Wow.
Right? Wouldn't you say that?
I'll take it.
Yeah. Over 7 million subscribers, over 1 billion views. For people who don't know you, how would you describe your content briefly?
Oh, man, that's so hard. I haven't practiced this one. I think back in the day, my description of my channel, what I do, would be a little different than what I do now. But if I had to maybe average it, I would say I do a lot of commentary videos. I speak my mind. I find things that I'm very passionate about, and I'll make videos on them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So it's a lot of you, over the years anyway, comedy and speaking your mind.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Exactly.
In your room, in your office or whatever. Yeah. So I was jotting down some questions to ask you today, and I was going to finally find out where iDubbbz comes from. And so I was, brainstorming what it could be, and I thought, is it dub music, like iPhone, like iDubbbz? And then I thought, well, dubbing music tracks, he's probably too young to speak in that language. And then I thought, well, there's UW, which stands for University of Washington. And then I thought, his first name's Ian, so does his last name start with a W? And then I was, of course, that's got it. That's what it is, right?
Wow, that is it.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never heard someone logic the whole thing out. That's pretty good. My original last name is Washburn. My new last name is Jomha. That's my wife's last name. But yeah, I can't change the username now.
Yeah. I think I feel bad for a lot of you earlier YouTubers who were pretty young when you started your YouTube career, and you just picked a random handle at the time that might have just been your email address that you randomly chose. And then you became I forget his name, Penguin there's a 0 in there or something.
Yeah.
And I don't even know his real name. I'll see clips of him in news channels and stuff. And I just figure if he could go, I don't know, if he could go back in time, he'd probably choose a different YouTube channel name.
Yeah, I think he's had a lot of success, kind of shifting it, because he also goes by Critical as well. So
like Moist Critical.
Yeah, Moist Critical.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I relate to that. My wife's old username was or streaming name is Rainbow Kids. And this is something she had from when she was 8 or something like that. Yeah.
I'm not in love with Psychology in Seattle as a title, to tell you the truth.
It's a little sterile.
Yeah, I didn't know. I spent some time trying to think about what to name it. I won't bore you with the details, but it is what it is. So it's better than Penguin with a 0 in the middle of it. But so I wanted to talk about how I got to know you. I first learned about you on the William Osman YouTube channel. You know William Osman?
Yes.
Yeah. So he makes comedic engineering videos. And I, at one time in my life, was going to be an engineer when I was in high school and early college. And I liked his comedy. And I just thought you were one of his friends. I just thought you were one of his buddies. Apparently, at the time, you were this giant YouTube star, but I didn't know that. And I also met Michael Reeves on his channel. And then I started watching his channel, and he made some videos about training for a boxing match called Creator Clash, where all these YouTubers were going to box. And Michael Reeves was pretty terrified. He's a smallish,
scrawny,
half Asian guy like me.
Right.
I mean, I'm not small, but he's pretty small.
You played football, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. I watched Creator Clash itself to watch him, and then I watched the end of it, and you were the main event, boxing Dr. Mike, another huge YouTuber. And then I discovered that you were the organizer of the event. And I thought, who's this iDubbbz guy? I have no idea because I'm old. And I that's as far as I went with that. I don't think I actually looked at your channel. Sorry about that. Then people started sending me an apology video that you made. And I watched it, and I actually thought it was one of the best public apologies I've ever seen, YouTuber or politician or otherwise. You know, I like to analyze public apologies, and I have a system and a criteria set, a rubric, if you will. And you had all of the markers of genuineness. You were talking freely and fluidly, and I just thought it was a really great apology. I didn't know what you were apologizing for exactly. You were referring to things, which we'll get into, I hope. But so I posted that, and then my wife said, iDubbbz commented on your video. And I open it up, and you were one of the top comments because everyone's upvoting it.
Right.
And you said something like that you had watched my content before. And it always terrifies me because whenever I talk about somebody, I'm always worried that I'm going to hurt their feelings if they watch. I just always figure I'm small potatoes. No one's ever going to watch my stuff. But yeah, you had said you'd watch. How did you discover my content?
Oh, man. Kind of a long story, but I would say there's a period of time when my wife and I met in 2016, it took a while for us to, like, I guess, figure things out because we were both content creators, we're like public, and I was very popular, and I don't know, there was just a lot of internet opinions about our relationship, and it got even worse when my wife launched an OnlyFans. And I was very supportive of it. I thought it was cool. I didn't have a problem with it, but I was very surprised that the internet had a problem with it. A lot of my fans specifically at the time. Now being like 5 years away from it, I'm like, oh, that was...
What do they have a problem with?
I came across as a person who would have a problem with something like OnlyFans. I think a lot of people saw me as a very like... kind of conservative-minded person who would make fun of that sort of thing. Despite not having a history of, even commenting on sex work, that's the vibe they got.
So they're thinking you're like you're a hypocrite or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But I bring that up because I think that's around the time my wife Anissa and I started watching 90 Day Fiancé. And, watching that show, we wanted so much more commentary on it because we had our opinions about what was going on. So naturally we looked up commentary for it and we found you. Mm-hmm. And it was so helpful, specifically for me because I was not into the idea of therapy. I was not in the idea of even reflecting on my actions too much. I just was not in touch with much of anything I was feeling. So watching that show and then getting your take on what was playing in these certain situations, it kind of allowed me to in some ways view my own behavior, but removed in several ways because I'm a lot less defensive. If my wife, brought it up, instantly get defensive about it. But hearing a, professional psychologist breaking down someone else's situation, I'm like, seems about right.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the appeal for a lot of people. I could see that, right? It's easier to swallow the pill if you think someone else is swallowing the pill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So do you mind sharing what precisely you discovered about yourself?
I don't think there was anything too precise. I think in a lot of ways, because I think the first time we were watching it was the season with Colt and Larissa. Mm-hmm. And there were just things that my wife would point out because we would talk while watching the show constantly. There's things that would be pointed out by Anissa that she could almost comment on my behavior or how she was feeling in certain situations by just commenting on how Larissa felt, or, if she felt like Colt was being unfair or anything like that. And there's just so many good examples. Like, that's the whole show, right? Is just jumping between different stages in couples' relationships. So it's hard to say specifically. I guess a really good one, I think, is I wasn't into spending a lot of time with Anissa, and in my head, this was like a lot should be in quotes there, because I had a very I guess low tolerance or weird idea of what a lot of time was. And then seeing who was it? Michael and the Ukrainian woman, Natalie. And kind of seeing her in that home, in that house, in the middle of Squim, super isolated. He would drive and take the ferry to his work and go all the way back. And then he'd also have his mom in his ear the whole time on that whole drive. She would, by the time he got back home, she would want to do something. She probably felt really trapped. And just watching that, there was a lot of parallels in my life, because I had a horrible schedule. I would go to bed at 3 a.m. And I would wake up at 3 p.m. And by the time I woke up, my wife didn't want to bother me, or my girlfriend at the time. She would want to do stuff when I woke up, but she had been awake, for the past 8 hours. So I don't know. There's just these dynamics where I was able to relate to it when it was kind of a completely different situation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. So then you commented, and I was like, whoa, that's amazing that he even saw this video, let alone knows about my previous stuff. And then in this apology video, you talked about how you had made cruel content. I actually watched a bit of it again today to remind myself. This was a couple of years ago, or a year ago, when you published this apology video?
Last summer. Summer of 2023.
And you talked about how you were morally grandstanding. You also talked about how you were being bigoted. You used that word a number of times, and racist in particular. You said you harassed particular content providers or other sort of famous people. You weren't just harassing random people. It was other people online that were notable. For the people who don't know the controversy, can you describe what happened? What were you doing, harassing, the bigoting? Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into it, but
I'm good to get into it.
Okay.
I think that's one of the reasons why making that apology in the first place was so freeing and necessary, is because I do want to feel comfortable talking about these things rather than thinking that I'm going to step on some sort of landmine. And
I saw videos. I don't know if you had posted them or I'd just come across them, where just before the apology video, you were in interviews and you were kind of alluding. You were sort of dancing around, because people would ask you about stuff and you'd be like, well, I don't know if I'm so proud of that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it was what you were known for. So that must have built up over time, where you're just like, I just have to come clean and stop dancing around it. Was that the thinking? Yeah,
definitely. And I guess to give context to it, I started on my channel making videos criticizing Kickstarter projects. That was a fun and exciting thing for me to do, because it was
Can I ask you a little bit before that? I mean, maybe you starting at the very beginning, but what were you thinking at the if we're starting at the beginning, which I want to do. I'm very curious on a number of levels, just as a fellow YouTuber and as a YouTube watcher myself. What were you thinking in the very beginning? How old were you at the time?
Gosh, I think I was working at Legoland, and I was in college as well. I want to say
it's in California.
Yeah, my final 2 years or something. So I was in college, and I think the motivation was just I don't want to have a regular robot job, And that was like almost strictly where it came from. I don't want to have a robot job. I want to do something that is like less soul crushing. And
that's why I became a therapist, actually.
Yeah.
I was working as a business goon, and I liked it. It was fine, but I just thought there's got to be something more. So
it's powerful how motivating just not wanting a robot job is. It's kind of sad because I wish a little bit of I wish there wasn't so much like desperation in that, like motivation, because I just didn't want to have like the Legoland job that I was working.
You're saying you wish you would have been positively attracted to the content instead of resorting to the content.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Some of it was good, right? Like I got into it initially because I really liked doing video game content. So I was doing gameplay stuff, but that was okay. It was doing just all right for me. I was like making, I don't know, $2,000 a month, and I was happy with that. But
well, that's pretty good right out of the gate. I mean,
totally.
Most people don't.
But that I was gonna say it wasn't super right out of the gate. That was like a buildup of like 5 years doing it like casually.
Oh, okay. So you're doing it on the side. You're
Yeah.
playing games and you're working on your shtick, your style, and building your audience over 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like early 10s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then there was a certain point where I wanted to like put my neck out there a little bit more because I hadn't even shown my face on that channel. So I was like, oh, this is a big step, showing my face. And,
Just curious, what games did you play?
a lot of indie games.
Okay.
I mean, I had
Games I wouldn't have heard of.
I had a Minecraft series for a while. Yeah, probably a lot of games you.
So it wasn't the typical, like, I want to say Fast and Furious, but it's the other.
Gran Turismo, Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto, yeah. I've played that, at least a couple versions. It's not really my thing. Anyway, okay, so you're playing indie game. Were you sort of the alternative gamer?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just, I mean, when you're that small and you're so desperate to get views, just anyone watching your video, finding the niche is like super important. If I was doing Grand Theft Auto videos, I probably wouldn't have gotten any views.
Oh, okay.
Unless maybe I was making videos on specific things like mods or something.
Were you obsessed with growing the channel? Like, because for me, when I started my podcast and YouTube channel 2008, and I've always been obsessed with all the things about the podcast: content, production, audience, merch. Were you super into it, or was it just like, I'm just doing this on the side?
I was super into it. I had like kind of the grind set going on where I was like, I even like scheduled things back then. I don't really do that anymore, even though I probably should. But I had like, no romantic prospects. I was on my own. I wasn't even worried about school. I was just like getting C's through college just to, get the degree, and just kind of focusing on that. Like,
can we go even further back? What kind of kid were you? What kind of high school kid? I'm just curious. Like, because you're saying that you didn't have any romantic prospects at the time. Like, was that a pattern, or was it just like?
Oh, totally a pattern. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I just like, I don't know. I had a couple of girlfriends in high school, but like it didn't last long. I was just like, I don't know, I guess I wasn't terribly interested. I think I had other worries or distractions in my life.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I would say like my high school, middle school, elementary school journey was roughly about the same in all the grades. I was just like trying not to be seen, basically. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because you're very seen now.
Yeah. I don't know.
So how would people describe you? Like an acquaintance in high school, how would they describe you?
Probably quiet. Yeah. I think it gave me a lot of like confidence, not confidence. Like, it's easy to be confident, in my opinion, in front of the camera alone. And especially when you take in the editing program, it's like, all right, I'm smart.
Yeah.
Look it, I'm confident.
Yeah, that's part of the appeal in the beginning, and still that you can just edit out if you make a fool out of yourself, or just don't air it, you know? So I've always liked that aspect to it. Okay, so were you happy as a teenager?
I would say so. I had a lot of things that like it would have been nice to have like a partner at the time.
Yeah.
Like I definitely wanted something more. I wasn't like super like it was nice to have friends. I hung out with my friends a lot. That was fun.
So you had a good group of friends that you had fun with. Were you close to your friends, or was it just a lot of hanging out, playing video games, that kind of thing?
Oh man. It's interesting because I'm realizing at this time in my life that I probably wasn't super close to those friends. Just getting just seeing how even my wife Anissa, how she talks to her friends and what she shares with her friends. It's like I never went that deep with those friends. So I still think of them as like my best friends, like very solid, very close, but we definitely, stopped at a certain level. We didn't go deeper. Yeah.
Okay. And by saying that you wished you had a partner, a long-term, attachment, were you lonely? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, a pretty average sort of life, sounds like.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
like friends and no jail time or anything as a teenager?
No jail time. I was really into staying out of trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
And well, that's interesting, because as a YouTuber, you push the envelope a lot, and seemed comfortable with incurring criticism. What's that about? Because like for me as a content provider, I am not like that. Like the one big moment that I can think of for me along these lines is when I was reacting to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and the YouTube channel was doing pretty well at the time, but it really blew up around that time, and I was getting all these requests for interviews and collaborations and a lot of criticism. Nothing like what I'm sure you have experienced, but it was meaning because your audience is so much bigger.
Right.
If 2% of the people hate you, then it's just going to be a lot more people for you than it is for me. But it was a lot of people, and to this day, 2 years later after the trial, people are still trying to take me down because of I don't even know what. Because I don't know.
Interesting.
I thought during the trial I was just providing the context. I never said anything about what I was watching because I'm not on the jury. I wasn't there. We're just hearing people's accounts. So I don't know. It could all be true. It could all be lies. I don't know. Right. But anyway, in my clinical experience, I've worked with abuse victims and perpetrators. That's what I would do. And somewhere along the way, I must have said something that tweaked people. Anyway, I did not like that to the point where you could say that my internet presence was growing up until that point. And after that, I was like, I want to bring it back a little bit and just plateau.
Right.
And so I purposely don't do things that will get me attention beyond what I'm already getting. So for me, constitutionally, I can't handle it. It ruins my sleep.
Yeah.
I will suffer emotionally. I'll cry just sitting in my office.
Right.
I started getting really scared to even say anything. My sentences weren't coming out fluidly because I was second-guessing every word as I was talking. And it was ruining my life. My health was suffering. And I just couldn't do it. So when I see someone like you, and then, there's a number of notable YouTubers in your camp that seem to be comfortable with that space of creating controversy.
Well, it's interesting. I relate heavily to the way you describe that, and I would say that I only started relating to that when I was being legitimately like, I would say more like honest and like, I don't know, just kind of taking some accountability for like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have this policy of I get to say whatever I want, and like, you guys should know, the audience should know what my intent is, or cut me some slack or whatever. Because like I would say before the apology, like it was a lot easier to have the mentality of like just kind of ignore like any I guess dissenting critical opinion of me. But once a lot of people realize like, oh shit, like you feel bad about doing things, or you I don't know, it's tough because I think it's different. Our situations are different because I created a very specific type of viewer. I attracted a very specific type, and there are people who like to watch these videos who are that are being critical of other people or organizations. I would say there's like there's a lot of people where that is the main interest, the main content they're consuming on YouTube. And for me to sort of like disavow that or say like I went too far, I think it upset a very large and specific amount of people in my audience. Whereas I think what you're describing, it's totally valid. I think it's this. I think you were able to like recognize it a lot sooner. I had like a huge amount of people that I didn't sort of realize were in my audience and would like kind of, I guess, turn on me once I said what I said. Yeah.
I'm really curious about this, and I don't know if the audience is, but I am, because I, over 15 years, have been thinking about this relationship that we have with the audience. Before you hit that Y in the road and decided, I don't know if I want to do this kind of content anymore, where, according to your words, you were being cruel and bigoted and racist. When you were making those jokes, you were mid-20s, right? And, some people would say, well, he wasn't a teenager, he was in his mid-20s. That's a lot of the criticism about you, because, once you decided to apologize and take responsibility for that behavior, they're saying, you weren't 15. It's kind of a different thing. But, well, first off, what do you think about that criticism?
I mean, you can use it. We use that for a lot of things. So, I mean, you could say that I should have known better, but I definitely take I don't know. I've grown a lot in the past, 3 years, and I am firmly of the belief that we don't know at what point someone is at in their journey to discover things. It's, everyone's got a different journey, and who knows when that happens for some people. It could happen way later in life. But in some cases, for it to really impact you in a big way, maybe it needs to be like a tragedy in your life, something very big that really moves that needle.
So what was it for you?
For me, I mean, I would say the OnlyFans drama moved that needle a little bit, because I was like, ooh, okay, so this is...
So are you saying it because your audience was suddenly revealed to you as, wait, I don't agree with what you're saying here.
They didn't just automatically understand that I could have this opinion about my wife or sex work or anything like that.
Yeah.
And just, I guess the same thing with a lot of random other things, like interactions with fans, where, a mirror was held up a little bit to me.
Yeah, you mentioned in another interview how a trans fan came up to you and said, I know you don't like trans people, but can I get a selfie with you?
Yeah.
And what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was awful. It didn't happen all the time, but there were enough events going to Comic-Cons and PAX and all these things where, I got a vibe. I had a random guy come up to me at like at a convention and shout the N-word at me, and I was like, of course, this is why. Like,
so this is what I want to drill down on.
Yeah.
Because it's not just from an audience member, myself, to you. I have seen this happen with a lot of content providers, not just YouTubers, but also back in the day, radio personalities like Laura Schlesinger. My memory of her was that when she started out, she was just providing just regular talk radio content. And then fast forward 5 years and she's this, I don't know, what people would call her toxic and misogynistic and shock jockey kind of situation.
Yeah.
And so you can apply this to people like Howard Stern, because there's different phases of Howard Stern, right? Or other YouTubers. And you know, you could even say people like Jordan Peterson or even Donald Trump. You compare their current shtick to 10, 20 years ago, it's a completely different shtick. Sometimes, like Donald Trump, the completely opposite. Mm-hmm. He used to be pro-gay marriage. You know, he's very liberal. Right. Now he's like, you know, this other thing. And as an audience member, and your audience would probably see it that way, because at one time they thought they could depend on you to lead the way and to fight back against something, PC culture, or what was it that they thought you were doing?
I think it was that. It was a lot of PC culture. I mean, I was making videos like during a time where it was very popular online to be like anti-social justice, and in a lot of ways I've been like lumped in with a lot of people who were making big anti-social justice videos back then. I was definitely like part of that culture. I definitely wouldn't deny that. But yeah, that was the idea. Like,
so were you always like that? Like in your teens and college, were you
for sure
like with your friends? Mm-hmm. And where did that come from exactly?
I would say my upbringing generally,
like your parents kind of thing.
Parents, relatives, friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see also just being of your generation, and you have a lot of private jokes online with each other, or anonymous jokiness, gamer. You know, back then there's a lot of that kind of talk, and still is, and it was not great, you know. But you know, young people and their developing minds, and they're trying to figure things out. So you had those two angles going, both your upbringing and maybe your community as well. I don't know. And then
I will say I did have, and I think I don't know who can relate to this, but I did have this idea. I looked up to comedians for sure when I was growing up, because like you said, it's kind of part of that culture. Like a lot of like gamers, they kind of have
like
young
Louis
men.
C.K. will have a long routine about pedophilia or something.
And I admired their ability to say, I guess essentially like walk that line and inform the audience, like, you trust what I'm saying. You believe me to be like a credible like source of information. You trust that I'm just making jokes. You trust that my intent is good in saying this joke. And I really liked that, you know, comedians or people could do that. Like, if you explained yourself well enough, if you set it up well enough, you can essentially say these words that are like very taboo, or, you know, talk about subjects that are very taboo. So I did like the premise. It felt like a little bit more freeing. It's like, oh, that would be awesome if people... if I could explain myself in that way, explain myself well enough.
That's interesting. I wonder about your generation, and maybe particularly young men. Did you feel particularly, you and your friends, particularly restrained in that way? Because you grew up in the midst of PC culture as it was really coming into full swing. Did you? I'm just trying to get behind what is that motivation of just I want to be free to be able to say and say things. And
it feels very silly looking back on it now, but I think that is what it was. I think it was a paranoia and a fear that things are changing, and that, it'll get worse or whatever. Because you could argue now, we're less free than we've ever been. You can't say X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Me personally right now, I don't feel like I'm restricted in that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Arguably, only certain people were free in the past, and there were a lot of people who weren't free. Because I could see a scenario where you and your friends, I'll just tell a little anecdote. When I was contracted by this district to be the psychology expert at this camp that taught a lot of psychology concepts and whatnot. And I spent a lot of time at the camp just hanging out with the kids. And one of the kids he was like, "Oh my God, that's so gay." And this would have been maybe around 2010-ish or something. I don't know. And it was a common enough phrase that people said back then, and although it wasn't considered great, you wouldn't get a lot of pushback from people. And I had a good enough relationship with him that I just turned to him. I was like, no. It's not. Think of another phrase. I know that I don't think you're trying to be homophobic, but that shit's got to go, because that's just not cool. Not around me or ever. Don't ever do that. You're better than that, And so I wonder about those experiences for teenage boys, or really any teenager, and that kind of feeling, whether it happened directly to you or you see someone else get humiliated like that, because I kind of humiliated him. And I didn't know what else to do. I guess I could have pulled him aside, which, thinking back, but I wanted everyone to know that wasn't okay. Not that that's a rule, but it's just, think of another phrase. There's, be creative. There's 1,000 other ways you can say that's stupid, or that's silly, or something. There's another adjective in your repertoire.
Jerk face.
Yeah. So I wonder about your generation, if your community or your home or the online activity you're in, it could really feel like an oppressive force. Because I think that this is not just you and people even in the YouTube community, but I think this applies to conservatism in general, the backlash against liberal politics and the backlash against social justice. And I'm just really curious, where you think you were psychologically back then.
Yeah, I think, genuinely, I think a lot of it was fear motivated. I think, it's very easy, I think, to be kind of, I'll say, tricked into thinking that these things are very important, or that everything is kind of a slippery slope, when oftentimes they're just, like the example you gave of, just getting corrected, let's not, it literally just comes down to let's try to not hurt other people's feelings. And I don't know, that was I think it would have probably helped to have a lot more solid role models in that way, because I think even back then I wouldn't have had, I don't think I would have had too many people other than maybe teachers or professors or whoever telling me that wasn't an okay or okay thing to say. And I don't know, I think there was just a lot of scapegoating. If someone were to tell me that's not cool, my interpretation of it wouldn't be it's not worth it, because you might, you don't know what other people are going through. You might hurt someone. Instead, my interpretation, I think, was more along the lines of well, that's their responsibility to not get offended, basically.
So, you're thinking they're deciding to be offended.
Exactly.
They can choose not to be offended. So then you're making this content, and was that a primary drive?
Totally.
What was you wanted to push back on this PC culture?
Yeah,
I
think
didn't know that.
so.
I didn't, I've watched tiny little clips
Right.
in the interim of your content, and you've since unlisted a lot of your content from back then. So,
Yeah.
like, what percentage of your videos in the past did you unlist?
Oh, I mean,
Meaning
it's
they're
not,
not able to be viewed anymore.
right. It's not that many. I've specifically privated a bunch of like old gaming videos just because they're embarrassing.
Yeah.
I wasn't
me
giving
too.
any
Yeah.
salty takes or anything back then, but
Well, that is a question. When you're doing the gaming, were you chiming in with that kind of talk?
yeah, I might have had some "that's gay" kind of comments
Yeah.
here and there, but yeah, it definitely wasn't. It was probably pretty average for that time.
Okay.
I wasn't like dying on a hill to
Yeah.
say bad words.
But your primary motivation, consciously, your mission statement was, I want to push back on PC culture. That's my mission, and I'm going to do it like comedians do it, where you don't just yell at people online, you entertain, and then people are
Right.
more receptive to what you're saying, like a stand-up comic.
Right. I think that was the idea.
Interesting.
And I think it felt good because when I would make one of these videos and people resonated with it, I was like, oh, I communicated well. I communicated my point. Awesome. But I didn't realize all of the things that came with that. In some cases, there were a lot of people, like specifically with the video I made about Tana, there were a lot of people that just didn't like her. And there was a lot of like really wanting her to get taken down a peg or to be, criticized or made fun of.
So this is one of your main YouTube beefs that was famous, and there was a lot of content going both ways, a lot of commentary on this,
Yeah.
I would imagine. About what year would this have been?
I think probably maybe 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, and the audience doesn't know, can you just tell this story? Because this was a major
Yeah.
part. You mentioned this specifically in your apology video.
So at the time, I was making other types of videos along with the Content Cop series where I would criticize people. One of the series that I had was called Bad Unboxing. So I would open random fan mail stuff, whatever people sent me. And in some cases, it was some really sus, very racist, weird stuff. And a much older one, there was a box with some N-word paraphernalia, like weird old-timey stuff. I didn't like it. But I did say the word, and later, like around 2017, Tana, I think, made a tweet at me, something like that. Usually Twitter is where this sort of stuff starts. Where she tweeted something along the lines of, oh, this is so bad, something, and then said, kill yourself, or something like that. And I was like, that was in some ways great for me because I could now make a video about it.
And she's another young content provider.
Younger than me, yeah.
A YouTuber?
She's a YouTuber,
Okay.
I would say primarily.
So at the time she would have been around 20 or something?
I think so, 19.
And
Yeah.
what kind of content did she make?
She just did a lot of story time videos. So she would share a lot about her life, maybe embellish it a little bit, and make it fun and entertaining for her subscribers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you get this tweet, and you're thinking, gold mine. Now I can go back and forth with this person.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And she's a white young woman, just to be clear. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was like I totally saw it as an opportunity to dunk on someone, and it was a topic that was very I guess it shouldn't have been close to me at the time, but it was like, there's this essentially debate about free speech and like what should be okay societally to say and what shouldn't be. And I felt like, oh, what a great opportunity to point out that she was, when she was 16 or something, she was saying it in like a sort of a derogatory way, the way she was saying it. And whenever I'd say it, it wouldn't be. It would just be contextually for whatever the situation was.
So you wouldn't call someone an N-word. You'd be...
yeah, no.
You wouldn't call a black person the N-word. But, right?
No, there were some situations where I definitely was, I think, riding that line of, like, I'm going to, like, adopt black culture in a way. And essentially, like, you know, playing a character.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you've seen any of these like Shane Dawson type videos. Oh, okay. Well, he essentially does a lot of like pretty tasteless, like ghetto kind of characters.
Okay. So blackface without the blackface.
Exactly.
And with the N-word, you are saying that she in the past had actually said it as a slur, as an insult to an actual black person. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay, so...
There's a lot of context that I'm not even, like, aware of.
Okay.
Like, not that it, you know, obviously matters, but, you know, I think this was her friend that she was, like, making videos with, or what I don't know any of the actual context of any of her videos. Because this obviously wasn't stuff that she was publicizing
right.
or anything.
Okay. So then you get this tweet and you're thinking, one, content, and two, this is an opportunity for me to push back on a culture that I think deserves to be pushed back on because it's anti-free speech. So then what'd you do?
Well, it was that, and it was just this, like, just kind of icky feeling of like, well, you've said it, and you're not, no one's saying anything to you. You're telling me to, off myself.
Yeah. I think this is another part of this YouTube culture that I think is still around online, which is revenge or retribution.
Yeah.
Like you have to slap back. You can't just lay down or just kind of criticize back. Like you've got to, if they come to the party with a knife, you got to get a gun. And then the next person comes with a bazooka, and it just gets bigger and bigger. One, for content, but also it's like everyone is expecting you to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because they know you to be someone that doesn't back down, right? So even without there being views and money, frankly, from doing it, I'm guessing on the inside you'd be like, I'm not going to lay down. Like I'm gonna go after this person. Exactly.
And there is that sense, I think you kind of touched on it earlier, that sense of like, oh, this isn't like, I think for a long time, longer than I probably should have, I did think of myself as like a person like shouting into the void, and like I'm not having that much attention kind of thing. Like there were periods where it was just like, I spent so many years on Twitter just tweeting to no one basically, or 30 people. And I definitely reached this point where I was like, no one cares what I'm saying. And so I, in some ways, got desensitized to like kind of the vile and weird shit that I was saying. And I think that definitely extended into some of the content I was creating where it was like, I don't realize how much of an actual reach I have because I'm so used to it not actually mattering too much anyway.
Yeah, and one of the science details that we can point to is that we've done a lot of research on brain development and also with moral development, and we've known this for decades that there's a lot of development past 18. We kind of think, oh, you're 18, you're an adult, so you're done. But you're not, brain-wise, morality-wise. So with you're in your mid-20s and early 20s, and your fan base is all in that category too, or younger. And so, there's development that's left to be done, right? And also a big part of, for me, and I'm thinking maybe for you, although you haven't said this directly, is empathy isn't just something that we just necessarily have for people automatically. I mean, we have an automatic care and compassion for others and animals that we kind of relate to. But in order to have compassion and empathy, we have to understand what they're going through. If we don't understand or we're misinterpreting what they're going through, then it doesn't provoke feelings of empathy or compassion or altruism. And if you're privileged as a white person and you've never been in a situation where you've been oppressed or marginalized or called a slur or threatened, that it's hard to know. And with the discourse online, there isn't a lot of opportunities for that because a lot of it's just yelling at people.
Yeah.
White people that are yelling at non-white people yelling at white people, instead of what I recommend, which is what I do in my office with couples, which is let's stop yelling and start explaining or asking questions, and what's your experience, and be vulnerable, right? So for someone, I don't know for you, but if like that moment that you met, and there were apparently a number where someone comes up to you and they're a human being in flesh and blood right in front of you, and they say, I know you don't like trans people, but can I have a picture? And I'm guessing that you sense pain, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I hurt somebody. I thought I was just being edgy or pushing back on anti-free speech. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't know anyone really could be hurt by it. I thought PC culture was just virtue signaling. Yeah. I didn't know that it was based on empathy or care, or I didn't know that these words actually hurt people, because you've never been in those shoes, being called a whitey or a honky occasionally, that's a different experience than me being called a gook, like someone in Ballard was upset at me for a silly reason in my car. And they actually a young woman got out of her car, a white woman comes up to the car or what did she call me? A chink. I'm okay for the most part, but given my history of my family in this state of Washington, it cuts, it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me feel like I can walk around even in Seattle without knowing if someone holds those feelings against me just because of my genetics, I suppose. So along those lines, a question that I want to ask is like, if you had really known when you were 20 or 23 or 19, what I'm describing to you, someone gave you a chance, if they really just explained it and you gave them a chance, and maybe it takes a number of moments like this, a number of different conversations, would you have changed?
I think I would. Obviously, the context around it, I think, would have needed to be right. Like, if I got the full experience, because I would say for me, it did take, many years to talking to many different people to get to that point. I think there's a lot of nuanced things in my journey that I've talked about with many people, most notably my wife, and even some of our content creator friends who are, I would say, more progressive. Just things I hadn't really considered. There's a lot of, just really not thinking about what it means. Like your example of being called a slur, in your hometown, how it's not just that you were called a name. And I think for me, I always thought of doing something like that as they're just calling you the worst thing that they could think of, or the thing that'll hurt the most. And that's such it's such a lame, one-dimensional way to interpret it. It's like that always now sits in your head as a variable for how other people might be viewing you or hurting you is is like your skin color or your sexual orientation. And I never really thought of it that way. I only thought of it as just insult, just grab an insult out of the hat.
Right. It's from the outside, it might seem like it's just a moment in time and you're never going to see that person again. Can't you just say that they're a jerk face and move on with your life? And yeah, you can, but it inserts this notion of like, well, who else is thinking this shit about me? My boss, my friend, everyone in my life? I don't know. Just going to the store, are people looking at me? I know that people think about Asians this way. So how many of them are out here? It just makes you paranoid. You go to the restaurant and the waiter goes to another table and says, "Your table," and you're now wondering like, is it I don't even know, man. You know, and it, you know, it's just like this constant thorn in your side, right? And especially if I don't particularly stick out because I'm half Asian. 1, 2, there's a lot of Asians in Seattle, and a lot of half Asians now. But you know, imagine if you stick out in a more noticeable way, in some different identity. It's way more constant, you know? Even progressives will microaggress against that. And yeah, you know, you can get through your day, but you know, the way I like to explain it, it's like, well, yeah, if only 1% of the people in Seattle want to harm me, that's a pretty low rate based on my skin color. But if I come across 10,000 humans in a month, that's 100 people that want to harm me.
Right.
And that's fucking scary and unfair and aggravating and makes me feel sad, you know, like, what did I do to you? And it's terrifying. And so, and especially when you start involving like your loved ones are being attacked, your kids, it gets upsetting. And so when people start playing around with words like, why can't we say these words and why can't we express these opinions? It's like, well, yeah, you can, but you know, and I don't think there's enough of what I'm saying right now to people in your shoes 8 years ago to give you a chance to have empathy, to engage that. Because I think a lot of people would say, particularly back then, but I still think you have critics who would say this, that you don't have empathy at all. And you're just now turning, you're changing your mind because it's a grift, right? Yeah. That you don't really think these things. How could you have done those things if you don't still believe them? You know, how do you make that shift? That doesn't make any sense. You're just lying to everybody. The true you is the iDubbbz of 5 years ago. What would you say to that?
Well, yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, not like apologizing or acknowledging it would be the grift, in my opinion. If I had actually, you know, experienced and witnessed these things, and you know, it's very easy to, you know, lie to yourself and, you know, get to this point. I think like to what you were saying before about how it's like making people feel. There's such a like. I've seen it so many times, random videos online. I'm sure plenty of other people are consuming this, where, you know, a person of color will be like, you know, it's you're doing this or saying this because I'm black. And then everyone will say, oh, you're pulling out the race card, all that kind of stuff. And I think it really started clicking for me when I made that, when I realized that, like, you kind of have to have, like, that's always going to be in your mind, especially living in like modern day America. Like, there's no way that you can avoid not having the question in your mind about what other people are thinking. And it is a privilege not to have that question in your mind. I don't think, or I will say there have been instances where I was like, oh, I wonder if I was treated differently because of my skin color. But it has been so rare for me. And I would say in those instances, it was like when I entered like a different culture space, like when I was visiting somewhere in the South. But yeah, it like just literally, you know, flying somewhere else, experiencing a different culture, is enough to start, begin like having those like gears start turning, I think.
Yeah. So is there something you can give me of your heart while you were making those videos? Because I think it's not only helpful to know this, but I think there's so many souls that are redeemable right now. Because there's a lot of people still involved in the movement that you were a part of.
Yeah.
And the assumption from the progressive side is they're psychopaths. They don't have a heart. They don't have empathy. Clearly, look at what they're doing. Can you convince us that back then you did have a heart? You weren't callous and cruel in general as a human being.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. All right, I might have to work through it a little bit, but I think a lot of those things that I mentioned before about like, I think I was big into like, I guess I kind of said it already, where it was like intent was very important for me because my intention was never to hurt anyone. My intention was like, that was, I think, in a big way, what fueled me, because I know that I don't want to hurt other people and I don't want people to suffer, especially unnecessarily. So I think, it was, once I realized that intent, it's great, it's a thing to acknowledge, it's a variable, but it's not everything. And like, you can't just use this as sort of like a catch-all. Like, I can say whatever I want so long as people know that my intent is good.
So you were recognizing inside you didn't intend to hurt other people. You didn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to hurt others. Your message was intent matters.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay. Well, what would Anissa say about you back? Because, she met you in the middle of all this, right? Would she say that you had a heart, that you were a kind human being?
I think she would. Well, I'm confident she would. But she was also, I think, in a similar position to me back then. And we've sort of grown and changed together. It's been very hard and very slow. And, everything that we've like experienced, everything that I've experienced in my life over the past 8 years, we've done it all together. Like, we put on Creator Clash together. All the biggest controversies involved her and me, whether she wanted to be involved in it or not. So we did have all of these experiences like in conjunction. So when it was happening, I mean, it's very similar to therapy, I'd say. We were able to talk through all of these horrible things and like, talk it out and come to our own conclusions. About how we felt about everything and what hurt us and where we're currently at. I think she was definitely like, I mean, she was the one who put me on, obviously, to your videos and just therapy in general. Yeah.
So did you go to therapy?
I've done a couple of sessions online, but that wasn't it wasn't super helpful to me. So now I'm doing in person.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's that going?
I've only done the intake so far.
Okay.
I realize that I don't talk very often about my own story, and that kind of took me by surprise because I was like, I'm grabbing shit from like all sorts of different places, and it's all coming out very jumbled. But I think it was good because I don't know. Maybe it's bad because I'm trying to create value. Like, I'm trying to be on my grind set. I'm trying to create additional value for going to therapy other than, finding out more about myself or whatever. I'm like, could this help me business-wise if I, talk to someone?
Yeah, right. I mean, when you make content, especially when you make content while your brain is still developing, it really orients your life that way. Yeah. And I had a few months where I was kind of in that zone where I was thinking, when the the consultants were saying, you need more social media. They're always telling me, you got to be posting more on Instagram. Hey, try to get to 10 posts a day. I was like, 10? I can't even do one. There's nothing interesting. And I just take a picture of the same stupid thing I'm doing every day. You know, I don't know how many pictures of my dogs can I post, but so during that time, I just felt like everything, I'd be eating a bowl of cereal. So how can I work this into some content? It drives you nuts. It's not a healthy place to be. Anyway, so when Anissa was sad, for example, 7 years ago or 6 years ago, did you care about her sadness?
I did. Yeah.
I think. How can you convince us of that?
How can I convince you?
Aside from us talking with her at some point.
Man, it's hard actually, because that is one thing that I struggled with in our relationship. And I see it all the time on fucking 90 Day Fiancé, where it did get to the point where she would cry and I had no reaction. I would
like no outward and inward, or
so definitely no outward. Inward, I think I was in some cases I was annoyed.
Yeah.
And
did you feel blamed?
Yeah.
Responsible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot. I mean, there's so many, like, I don't know, confusing feelings, like, because she's anxious attached, and she would, like, and I'm very avoidant, so I would, like, I would just always, like, shack up in my room and just, like, I could just disappear in games or editing or whatever, the grind. And
did you have symptoms? Because avoidance has symptoms. It won't be obvious, but there will be suffering on the inside because there's a lack of getting your needs met. The strategy of avoidance was developed when we were very young because we learned it's better to just not depend on others because we can't consistently depend on others.
Right.
So we're just like, well, I'll just do stuff on my own. I don't really need people. I don't need people to help me or to interact with me, and I'll shut down my emotions and to some extent my memory, and I'm fine. Everything's fine. And depending on the degree, and I don't know to what degree you would say you're avoidant, but if it's moderate to severe, there's a lot of unmet needs going on, and there could be alcoholism or drug addiction or workaholism, I suppose, or anger. So what was the effect, do you think?
I definitely had a big anger issue. I got over it pretty quickly once I realized that it was a thing. And I'm very grateful for that, because it was scary. There were moments where it was like I didn't realize how loud I was getting in fights and how, like, intense I was getting.
With Anissa?
With Anissa.
Yeah.
And we shared all the time. It happened when we were in Edmonton at one point. This was like the last, like, huge blow up I had. We were just, like, walking outside our dog, and we were arguing. I was getting more and more elevated, and to the point where, like, I could hear myself, like, echoing through the neighborhood, and I was like, fuck, like, this is bad, because I realized in that moment that I didn't actually have control at all of, like, my volume. And yeah, Anissa wasn't getting louder. I mean, she was maybe getting more passionate in, the way she was speaking, but it wasn't, getting crazy. So yeah, that was definitely like a part of it. My childhood was maybe a little bit like non-typical, because I was raised for, I don't know, like maybe 6 or 7 years by my mom alone, because my dad was in prison. So it was, I think during that time, maybe something happened. I'm not sure, because I haven't even gotten to that part in therapy or anything. So hard to say.
I don't know if you're interested in these kind of questions, but was your mom stressed out when you were a young
definitely.
child?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're 3 and your mom is pretty stressed out?
Yeah.
What was she stressed out about?
Everything, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was me and my sister, 2 kids, and she obviously had to take care of everything in the home, get us to where we needed to go. I mean, she really had to heavily, I think, rely on my grandparents. I don't even think my grandparents were like that into helping. Maybe they were. I don't really remember, but a lot of like after school programs and stuff like that to allow my mom, time to work and time to do all of the things that she needed to do.
Yeah, that's a recipe for emotional neglect, unfortunately, when you have even a well-meaning, loving parent just doesn't have enough time or energy. Love and attachment can often be the icing on the cake. The cake is keeping you alive and fed and educated and making sure you're dressed before you go to school. And
I will say, just because, I don't know, my parents may come across this video, I love them both. They are the best parents for me.
Yeah.
Love them.
But under stress, anyone,
yeah.
you can have parents that are refugees from war that will not have time for the icing on the cake, and a lot of good parents, but you stress out the system, and something's got to give, and sometimes it's emotional needs. So what it'll create is an environment where a kid is just kind of like reaching out, and either they're not there because they're at work, which is understandable, or the parent's stressed out, doesn't have the capacity, and so you just learn, I'll just play with my Legos, and I don't really need anybody. And I'll just convince myself of that. And then over time, neurologically, you just kind of become oriented. You don't even notice anymore that you have a need, that there's grumblings deep down of like, I want connection, I want love, I want security. But it's so deep that you just don't even notice it anymore. And you just convince yourself, I'm fine. That's the avoidant syndrome.
Yeah. Well, I think that is, I mean, I'm trying to go back to the original question. I know you're trying to have a light at the end of the tunnel for people who are, me from 8 years ago. But hearing you mention that, I'm reminded of like, I was very not in tune with the things I was feeling, particularly early in my relationship. And obviously like, growing up in my teens, early 20s, like I didn't know what I was feeling. And it I think me starting to recognize it was basically like, I would tell Anissa like, okay, I'm feeling something right now. Like, I don't know what it is. I haven't, like put my finger on it. I think I'm frustrated. And, usually I think that I would default to frustration. But that's not, I mean.
Were you often hurt?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, sometimes. I don't know.
It's a hard
really
one to admit,
situation.
but it's a common substrate to frustration.
Right.
It's just like, I think you hurt my feelings earlier, or I feel distant, or I feel rejected. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would get. I definitely don't get trapped anymore. I recognize it like straight away, and we have tools. Like I'll just straight up ask Anissa now. Before there was so much like ruminating on things and thinking about like what was said, or like there was so much like bottling up the feelings, and just like that's part of the anger and not being in touch with emotions and everything. Or I didn't really realize that you could like kind of let steam out periodically, and you never have like a blow up.
But also the avoidant symptom is you don't even notice the steam.
Yeah.
Because you don't even feel your body really. Mm-hmm. And your relationship with Anissa and your own strengths are really shining through. The ability to have that petri dish, if you will, to be able to test things out. So I think I feel something. That's great. I mean, did you just come up with that yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, Anissa and I, like, we're kind of working on it together because it was...
It's because of my videos. Just say it.
Well, I was going to say that.
I'm joking.
Legit.
I'm joking. No.
Well, it's literally like it was not in my vocabulary at all. Like a lot of the things, like it's crazy how much you can get, how much you can help yourself by just learning certain words. Like that alone, I think was huge. Just in, knowing like, I don't know. Yeah, there was a lot of times I said I'm feeling overwhelmed, and that was just like, in some ways just panic button, like something's happening. I don't know what it is. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And thankfully, like Anissa wanted to like avoid me blowing up. So she would, we would try to talk through it and problem solve, and we would.
That's great. I mean, because a lot of people would start fighting, and I'm sure that might have happened sometimes, but the strength that she could exhibit to be able to calmly walk you through it, and for you to trust her to explore those things and connecting. I mean, it sounds very therapeutic. It sounds very
it was not easy. There was like, I would say our first 3 years of a relationship was fucking so hard because we were like long distance, and we were like 6 months in California, 6 months in Alberta. And, it was like things were changing all the time. And I mean, it's definitely a slow process. It was work. But I'm very glad that I didn't let like the internet like tell me like, or like
you're a simp.
Yeah.
That's what they would say. I don't even really understand that word. I'm old. What does it stand for?
Squirrel in my pants.
Is that really?
No, I'm just saying.
Right. I would have believed it.
I always thought, I think it kind of came out of nowhere, but I always interpreted it as like sympathy. Oh. Like you have sympathy for women, I don't know, or a woman in particular.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was this growth that you're doing off camera, I'm guessing because you had been lonely your whole life. That's the avoidant condition. Even though your parents are lovely, I'll take your word for it.
Thank you.
And, take it from me as a family therapist. I've worked with very lovely parents who, the parent has cancer and recovers, but the treatment and the emotional toil it takes on the parents, when you have a young child, can do a number on the kid's attachment. And, there's time to make up for things. And the thing I always say is you can't not screw up your children. You just want to keep it to the level that your child only needs about 5 years of therapy instead of 25 years.
I like putting it that way because I always think about being a parent, and I'm like, it seems like kind of no matter what, you're going to neglect something.
So the conceptualization that I don't know if you already have or that I'm just coalescing right now is that with Anissa, you are finally in a relationship that is working well enough to stay together, right? And you've been lonely your whole life. And so a huge part of you, whether you knew it or not, in all likelihood was just like, oh my God, finally, like connection. There's a part of you for the first time, maybe in some ways, particularly romantically, right? And you are working on your emotions. You're starting to feel more. You're allowing yourself to feel more. It's starting to eke out a little bit, whether you kind of knew it or not, really. And then some key moments happen. Because, I just wonder if those moments, like where the trans fan came up to you and said, I know you don't like trans people, but can I have a selfie? I wonder if that had happened to you before you met Anissa, if it would have landed the same, right? Because with those things happening, along with your emerging connection with your emotions, which I'm detecting is about 5% down the road, by the way. The way you're talking is great. But I can tell there's a lot of work to do, which I think you recognize, which is good, and I have confidence that you'll do it rapidly. But that you're starting to get your feelings, and you're starting to notice, like, oh, I guess I do feel things. I now know what it feels like to have your feelings hurt, I think. And I'm hearing people with their feelings hurt. I don't like that feeling. And I now have that sort of empathy.
Yeah.
And Was that a major turn?
I think so. Thinking, yeah, because Anissa, she gave me a lot. Like, she was very much, she was not afraid at all to share with me how she was feeling. And when she was feeling hurt, she would say it. And, just, all the time telling me how my specific actions made her feel in that instant. And, I think that I don't think I would have had the same reaction if not for Anissa. I think I think it would be. I kind of feel like my mind would have been essentially like preoccupied, and I would have just I probably would have pushed that comment from the fan to the side of like, oh, that isn't like critically important for me to think about right now. But I kind of feel with like that loneliness or those like needs being met, I feel like things like that are like now like not main priority, but like I don't know, they're in the moment. It's important, I don't.
Yeah. Well, because the idea goes is that neurologically avoidant people will literally turn off noticing what they're feeling and will even process things differently neurologically and also encode memories differently, less often, and it's particularly emotional memories because it's easier to not. You're 3 years old and you reach out emotionally like, hey, mommy's home. You like trying to get her attention and she sounds like a lovely person, but she's stressed out a lot, and then that experience doesn't go well, and it's easier to not remember that so that you can go on with the rest of your day because it's a general deadening of noticing and remembering and feeling, and over time, by the time you're even just 5 years old, but particularly later on, it's stuff is happening, but it's not accessible, and needs are piling up, and it can feel overwhelming to, the thing I like to say is that underneath every avoidant person's surface level defenses is an anxiously attached person, a preoccupied person like Anissa. There's someone down there that's just like desperately wanting to feel and to connect and to be secure and safe and reassured, but it's under like a bunch of those heavy blankets that people use to have, to make them feel like they're being enveloped when they're in bed. It's just like these lead blankets. It's like you could kind of hear something. So to start to connect with that, it is. There's an internal you in all likelihood that's like trying to come out. It's because it's finally in a space with Anissa who is there and isn't neglectful, right? Isn't stressed out, doesn't have a husband in prison, isn't working. Well, I'm guessing she works at home like you do, right? So it's available, and you're finally, it's like it's here, like let it out, take the blankets off, and then it starts to express itself, and you two of you are doing it sounding like very healthy because it could have blown up. Usually that's what happens in your scenario, by the way. Usually the preoccupied, anxious people will criticize and yell and become very upsetting in a lot of ways, controlling even, at the very least very critical. And the avoidant person is like, I don't need you. I'm done. You're crazy. You're psycho. I'm just going to break up with you or drift away emotionally. I'll find someone else. So the fact that the two of you managed to keep it together, without oversight, by the way, is a real testament. But that is really fascinating to me. And it just makes me think like how many other anti-PC culture people would just benefit from having an Anfisa in their life, Or sorry, an Anissa. Anfisa's from 90 Day Fiancé.
Right.
Anissa.
That's so funny.
If they had it, Anfisa, forget it. But if they had an Anissa, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just wonder.
Yes, I totally. Big time. And to be honest, like, it may have not gone so well if Anissa didn't go to therapy, because she went to therapy pretty early in our relationship. I want to say, like, when things were starting to get really bad. And she basically brought homework with her, and, you know, a lot of the words from therapy and stuff that just kind of gave us that little bit of, you know, extra... I don't know what you'd call it, but that little extra help, you know, to help navigate us through just arguments, because it's all like, it's been super small baby steps the whole way, you know, figuring out what is, you know, triggering us, all sorts of stuff.
Do you, this is sort of off topic or back to the other topic, do you still have anti-woke, because, you know, there's been a number of pendulum shifts, if you will.
Yeah.
And there are liberals who will say, yes, there are things we need to advocate for, but I don't know if we need to go that far.
Right.
Do you still hold any of those kinds of views?
I mean, it's hard. I wouldn't be, like, I guess, actively thinking about it. Like, you know, it might be some fringe thing maybe.
So it's not an active part of your daily life to still think about this stuff?
No.
So you just completely put it behind you? Just the whole topic?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because I think I interpreted that sort of stuff as like a boogeyman at the time. And it's like, you know, they ripped the mask off or whatever, and it's just like a dude or whatever. I don't know. It's just not, it's not a fear of mine. I'm not afraid of the woke agenda or anything. It's like, you know, I think that helped a lot in thinking more about other people. Is like, I don't want to be baited in by like caricatures of like people on the left, where like, you know, because that's also another thing that really shifted my perspective as well. Is Anissa is Lebanese, half Lebanese, and she would always talk about how Arabs are depicted in, like, you know, a lot of media in the U.S. Or Canada. And it's like they'll always put out the most, like, wild, random guy as, like, the spokesperson on Fox News or any of these networks. Even the most, like, progressive networks, they'll put on some person who is not representative of the average Muslim, the average Arab person, and you know, Americans will just eat it up and accept it.
Right, and you know, you're 21 and you're not a world traveler, and you're in a cocoon of other people like you, and where are you going to have experiences with people other than yourselves? Well, it's on Twitter, it's online, and you get fed this information, even from the quote-unquote other side, right? These exaggerated versions. You know, there's a similar thing with feminism. You know, so for me, you know, I've been online since 2008, and as a progressive liberal, and as a feminist, and as a person who doesn't like racism, you know, occasionally on this psychology podcast, we end up talking about it, and I would get all the insults, the simps and the cucks and all that stuff, and manginas. You don't hear mangina
No, you don't.
anymore, you know?
That's a funny one.
Yeah. And I would get all that, and as my inner football player would come out, and I would tell people in the comment section, it's just like, you're going to call me a cuck? Because that shit doesn't play. So when and where? Let's go. You know, it's stupid. But that's what I'm used to doing. It's just like, if you have some guy calling you a pussy, it doesn't happen very much in my life, but it started happening online. And even though I was 45 and a therapist and a professional and a professor, I'm like, let's go. Let's see who's the fucking simp. Because I'm going to take a guess and say that I'm going to have you under my foot, and then I'm going to, make you tell me that you're the simp, right? You're the simp. And who knows? I mean, I'm old now. They'd probably get destroyed by anybody. But yeah, so I would sometimes engage with these guys, because they would say, come on my podcast or something. I'd be, okay, I feel confident I can stand toe to toe with someone. And they would say, how can you possibly call yourself a feminist? And I'd say, well, any rational person understands that sexism exists and is at least on some level advocating for fairness among human beings. And there's mounds and mounds of data demonstrating this. But they would say, well, that's not feminism. And then, they would show me what feminism meant to them, which was somebody on a college campus just screaming at someone unreasonably about what they claim to be a feminist movement element. But to me, I'm like, well, one, I kind of get where you're coming from, but that's not effective.
Yeah.
And you're taking it a little far. And why are you attacking that person? Like there's bigger fish to fry than some liberal professor who has a book that has a fictional scene in the book that depicts misogyny. It's like, it's fiction. That's the point. That's probably why the professor has it in this book, or chose this book, because it provides an opportunity to critique that. We can't just cancel a like, that's not feminism. You're actually working against, well, I don't know what's happening, but at least at the core, that's not what feminism is to me. It's not what feminism is to my colleagues at the university. Like, when we say feminism, we're just saying there's unfairness and mistreatment, and there's a history of that. And so it's along those lines. Like, you're 21 or 23, and so you're observing all of these depictions of these exaggerated straw people, if you will.
Yeah.
And you're like, why would anyone call themselves a feminist? Why would anyone be anti these kinds of words? Because look at these idiots. You know what I mean? Oh, the thing I wanted to get back to was, because I interrupted you way back when, was with Tana. So what did you do to Tana exactly? That's her name?
Yeah.
What did you do to her?
Well, I hatched a plan. Me and Anissa hatched a plan to go to her, like one of her meetups, because she was doing meetups all over the country. And we were like, oh, one of her meetups is in San Francisco. Let's just drive over there and to watch her freak out, me saying the N-word next to her. Like, she'll...
And would Tana recognize you?
She didn't recognize me.
Okay.
I thought she would recognize me.
So you went up to her?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought she would recognize me straight away, but she didn't. And even after she had made a follow-up video where she still didn't know it was me, she was just like, some horrible fan interaction happened, and I felt very scared.
What'd you do?
Oh, I just put my arm around her and said the N-word, basically, in a say cheese format kind of thing. Very dumb. The whole thing was just super stupid and immature, and I even said it at the time, obviously the only way to respond to something like that is be like, ew, gross, that's so inappropriate. Can you never, don't don't touch me, please leave.
But it must have, at the time, given the place you're coming from, to be quite a coup, because she calls you out on Twitter and has a big fan base herself, and then you manage. Because you're driving to the event and you're thinking, well, she's probably going to recognize me, and I'm not. What am I going to be able to do? But that's kind of your content, sort of on the fly, right?
Yeah.
But then as you're walking up to her, and she is, what's she doing?
Oh, she's just being cordial and meeting all the fans, and
so she just thinks you're a fan.
Yeah,
yeah.
And the thing is, I bought her merch there and put it on, so I did kind of just look like a fan.
Yeah,
I was definitely out of place, but she was just in the motions, I think, and greeting people, wanting to be nice. Very vulnerable position to be in. You know, interacting with so many fans.
Okay, so was that part of the empathy?
For sure, yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I definitely. Reflecting on the experience, I'm like, I doing fan meetups, period, doing this, I guess, service to your fans in the public by allowing them to meet you and setting up an experience for them like that. Some people might, if you're really pessimistic, you might say that it's all about stroking your own ego or whatever, but it's it's a risk, and, people die, and, it also, Tana has plenty of haters, and, obviously you wouldn't expect haters to show up, but, the option was there clearly. And yeah,
Well,
it's just,
plus just that feeling of well, this, once she figures out it's you, it's like, oh, if you just look at the facts, you walk up to her, you put her arm around her, though I'm guessing other fans are putting their arm around her as well, getting selfies or pictures or whatever, and you say the N-word, and then you just walk away. Is that's what happened?
yeah, I mean, the expectation was basically just that kind of thing. I think I don't know, it's also like in the moment, there's no very impulsive, like kind of weird behavior, but obviously security just came up and was like trying to kick us out, rightfully so. And, in my mind, the only thing that's going through my head is like, what do I record for? And what do I say for the video? And it's like, oh, we're getting kicked out. And
makes it all the better, right?
Yeah. Like, oh, drama.
Yeah. And from her standpoint, and as a content provider yourself, and I've been in these shoes as well, not nearly as much as the two of you have, but this feeling of like, well, if I just look at the facts, it's pretty innocuous, just a troll that decided to come up in person. But you don't know what else they're capable of, Like, I have a very elaborate security system on this house, and for my family, and it makes me sleep better at night to some extent. Has someone come up to me with a gun saying they're going to kill me, or has anyone lately made any sort of physical threat to me? No. But over the years, you'll get people that will seemingly be very, very against you and are willing to go to great lengths, given where they're at, to take you down, I actually, over there, you might appreciate this, to your right, see that framed piece of paper?
Yeah.
That is an official complaint on my license that someone submitted to try to get my license taken away.
Yeah.
And I normally would, when I received that last year, it would have just destroyed me, because most therapists are terrified of ethical violation accusations. So normally when I would get a letter like that, it would just destroy me. But because I've been online and would experience all the people calling me cucks and everything, like I had purposely prepared myself for the day and considered it to be a rite of passage. And I'm pretty sure that person was from the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. And the allegation is so ridiculous. I won't bore you with the details, but it's just comical. And so I framed it because it's a badge of pride. Well, anyway, so my point is that when someone makes a complaint about me, that shows they took the time. They're not just complaining about me or criticizing me or upset about me. They're taking actions, right? And when you hear all the news and the shootings and everything, like, it only takes one person to take you out of this world. And so when you show up at her event and she's like, well, one, iDubbbz, but also all of iDubbbz fans, which are many. Well, now what does this mean? Particularly for women, right? Because they're targeted a lot more than us, but everyone can get targeted this way. And so it sounds like that you had a reckoning regarding that realization later.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's what you're apologizing directly for.
Yeah, I think, it just felt like such a next level, like, gross violation of, someone, just like, I would never want that situation. Like, obviously there have been plenty of people to make videos about me now and be very critical and, dig into my life and make all sorts of accusations. But, showing up in person, like, that is pretty next level, like, not okay. And yeah, I definitely gave it more thought, and I was just like, ooh, this is like, it's scary. It's scary. I don't know what, because I've also been in situations after that where I'm like, it's been kind of like a fan-esque environment, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, fucking, like, anyone can show up and anyone can say whatever they want, and they can also troll me. And if I'm just trying to have a pleasant day and I don't want to be involved in that, like, I can't run away from it, really. It's in my face. I can't really avoid it. And, you know, so many people say, like, hey, if you're offended by something online, just, you know, walk away from the computer. And I, you know, created a situation where, like, she couldn't, you know, just walk away from it. I entered her life, and that's too much. Yeah.
And you apologized to her directly in the apology video. Did you talk to her directly or DM her or anything?
Yeah, we DM'd, and then we met at H3, Steamies, which I saw you had made a video for.
You met her in person at the Steamies?
Yeah.
Just recently?
Yes.
Wow. How'd that go?
It was good. She's a very resilient person. I think she's gone through a lot, and yeah, she's just like very, you know, let bygones be bygones kind of thing.
What'd you say?
I mean, I basically said, you know, like, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry about what happened. It was kind of a weird environment because there was a lot of people there, like, with cameras and stuff.
Oh, it was filmed?
Kind of.
Like for the H3 or
No,
for...
just random people that she was with.
Oh, just like personal filming of it?
Yeah.
So you couldn't just have a private conversation without everyone filming?
Yeah.
Oh, so it
just felt a little, like, rushed and, like, not
yeah.
Yeah, not
it's kind of red carpet
authentic
situation.
Yeah, it was like in the back, like the green room, in between green rooms kind of thing.
Okay. Well, at least you're not in the crowds.
No.
But anyway, okay. Well, so how'd it feel to...
It felt good. I mean, I'm glad that I apologized, and I think in the future I would like to make it more of a habit to, like, well, obviously not get in those situations, but also, like, you know, deal with, it's so hard because a lot of people that I've made content cop videos on, I don't think a lot of them have, like, emotionally matured too much since I made the videos. A lot of them have gotten, like, a lot, like, worse, like a lot of, like, just super dangerous or offensive behavior. So I wouldn't want to, like, make it a habit to, like, reach out and, like, make amends. But Tana, thankfully, in that situation, she's obviously, like, grown a lot, and I felt like this is way easier for me. This is a slow pitch, you know.
I'm curious, in the future, have you thought about or have you started to direct your anger or commentary or your influence in a different direction, or are you just scaling back from trying to socially engineer society?
Socially engineer society. Yeah, it's so hard because I am passionate about things. Like, I just recently made a video about this guy. I don't know if you've seen his videos, Cartnarks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I fucking hate his videos so much.
What do you hate about him?
Just that he's harassing people endlessly.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, it's pretty popular. I'm sure most people, younger people know, but for people who don't, there's this guy, Cartnark, who will go to a parking lot of a grocery store, and he waits for people who don't put their cart back. They just take their cart to the car, and they unload the cart, and they just leave the cart in a parking spot. And he has a very interesting shtick. It's, you know, quite polite, and he doesn't get aggressive at all. Well, unless you call putting a big giant magnet on your car aggressive or not. But he walks up to him, and he's just like, hey, sir, you know, I just think it would be a good idea if you put the cart back. You know, I think, you know, that'd be the responsible thing to do. And my guess is that there's a percentage that will, but at least the ones that go viral are these individuals who they always do the same thing. They just start screaming aggressively at this guy. Mm-hmm. And then the cart art guy will put like a big magnet on the car that says, I'm the sort of person that doesn't put carts away or something like
Lazy
that.
bones
Lazy
on board.
bones, that's right. And people, instead of just driving off with the magnet and getting home and throwing away the magnet, they stop the car, they get out, and they take the magnet, they threaten violence, they start, they just become completely unglued. I think a lot of the individuals that we see having particularly emotional reactivity have trauma that is being triggered, because it has that look to me. They're completely irrationally engaging with this. All they have to do is get in their car. And sometimes they're at the entrance to the grocery store and there's cars backing up behind it. There's a
Right.
traffic jam happening. And they're being filmed the entire time, then they know it. And, this regular suburban person is just becoming a viral sensation as they melt down in front of a camera. And I'm guessing some people are legitimate jerk faces, if you will, and just have a policy of aggression and, whatever. So what annoys you about it?
I mean, pretty much what you had described about, like, there are clearly some people who are, it's very, I think what it is like, the guy who runs at Sebastian, he's not a dumb guy. He knows what he's doing, and
He's really quick on his feet.
Yeah.
Like he knows how to reply. People, because they commonly have things that they will say to him, and he has real quick, logical rebuttals to everything that they have to say.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his grind, and it makes sense that he would have like a lot of. He does like essentially debating them, because it's like, well, there's no scenario in which, this is valid, basically.
Yeah, like they'll say, they pay someone to do this,
Right?
And then he'll say, so does that mean you litter?
Right.
Because someone's paid to pick up the litter.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense, and it never flies. It just aggravates them more.
Yeah.
So you made a video about that. So what was your
The main gripe was that he knows that these people that he's targeting, and specifically like putting online and making like the subject of that particular video, he knows that they're vulnerable people, and he knows that like I know, because I've made the same videos, and I feel, not the exact same videos, but I understand essentially picking out the right thing to target so that people don't have sympathy for the victim or the victim.
You know how to provoke someone to have behavior in front of the camera that will cause a reaction with the audience.
It's essentially a sweet spot where it's like, given like a slightly different set of circumstances, Sebastian wouldn't be one called like they say it a bit ironically, what a hero. He wouldn't be called a hero, and these people wouldn't be like super villainized for leaving their card out.
Yeah, it's the Karen phenomenon as well. Of the videos that I've seen, there are times when I'm thinking that person either is being triggered, it doesn't justify their behavior, but they're not in their right mind, one. Two, they could literally be suffering from psychosis or schizophrenia or something. Like, there's a percentage of people. And
that's what he says. He says that, not all disabilities are visible, so I can only go with what I can see kind of thing, which is the justification for doing it to people who are in disabled or handicapped parking spots.
Yeah, and I have to say, it taps into something that appeals to me, which is I'm a rule follower. I don't like it when people don't put the carts back. So it satisfies that itch for me.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm watching, I'm like, just let her go. Like, you made your point. She's humiliated herself enough. Like, just at some point, like, you're in a loop with this person. And maybe this is your point, and maybe this is your future content cop direction, is to, as someone who, because you just shared something that I wouldn't know, because I don't do crowd work. I don't know the sweet spot. There's a whole theory around this that you understand well, that you could actually I don't know if it's going after these people, but it's providing context and commentary. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you do it to a certain extent, where like, you know, what is the motivation behind making a particular like video, like breaking down, like you said, the Amber Heard or Johnny Depp trial, or even reacting or rating like an apology video. Like there are certain characters that online that you might avoid making videos on because you just don't want to like invite that crowd that would be interested in it. But then there's also like you could, I mean, I don't know if you actively think about this. I definitely do, where it's like when you're thinking about making a video on a particular person or topic, you want to kind of have that temperature check of like what is public opinion, like where is it kind of at?
Yeah.
Because that can kind of push the you know, wherever your video is at in a particular direction where it's like a little bit more positive. You know, like my Carton Arc one was not really well received. It was like the perfect kind of in the middle topic where like half my audience was like, this is cool. He has always annoyed me as well. And then the other half was like, iDubbbz, you're lazy bones. These people are pieces of shit. Like they need to be called out on their behavior. Like this is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a lazy bones in that I don't take the temperature of the internet before I do. I every once in a while I will, and I should do that more often. But I also don't know where to look half the time because I'm not as online as other people. But I think you're tapping into something that is a major factor in how your arc and also the arcs of other people that are still in their arc, which is that the audience creates the monster.
Yeah.
That
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so did you experience that? Big time. Did you experience that where you're wanting, you know, there's an internal motivation based on what we were talking about before. It's like, oh, I want to comment on this. I want to push back on what this. You take a temperature of maybe even your fan base because they're those sorts of people. They are, you know, vitriolic against that person, and you were more like over here in terms of how much vitriol you're going to give that person. But then you see this whole group of people that, given where they're coming from or their unmet expressions, you know, a lot of your fans probably had a lot of these thoughts but never spoke them to anyone because they didn't feel safe to, and you were giving that voice. And so you take that temperature and you're like, whoa, whether you consciously or not, you're like, okay, I guess I'll just get more, just, you know, just go a little bit further into the vitriol because maybe that's the right way to see it because so many other people see it, and certainly it'll help me with my audience. You go down the road a number of years and you've strayed so far from your original mission, from your original humanity, from your original you know, it's like you know, Alex Jones and Donald Trump and, you know, these people, they started out, if you look at their early content or you know, statements, there are seeds but not what you eventually see. And you're a rare example of someone that pulled out of that nosedive. I just think that's so fascinating on so many levels. And you could really provide a service to people. It's like you're an ex-cult member that can talk about like, I know what that is. I've been there. I've made those justifications to myself. I've been seduced by the audience and the numbers and the fame. You know, the more there's controversy, my numbers go up, and you just start to convince yourself of things. I didn't think I was being influenced by the crowd, but I think I was.
Yeah, there was a lot of there's a lot of things that I was definitely telling myself along the way, because I did have moments where I was like, is this like too much, or is this like justified, like the video that I'm making? And I would tell myself, yeah, like it is justified. You know, this person is, you know, being an asshole or whatever the thing is. I really like the idea of kind of getting in the brain of myself 8 years ago and being able to, and it kind of speaks to why I got into it in the first place. Like, I want to be able to use the specific words that like is compelling and convincing to people who do have this, who are thinking the same way that I was thinking, whether that's like fear motivated or what. But I want to do it. I haven't quite like written it down. Like, I'll have bouts of like inspiration where I'm like, oh, that is totally me from, 2016. That's why I did that. But it's not a common thought of mine anymore. I think because, like I said before, it's like the boogeyman is no longer there, so I'm not like really in the same place mentally.
Meaning there's not this thing that you feel is lurking that you need to fight against.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. But couldn't that thing be you 8 years ago?
It could be. I mean, that has been what I've been thinking about. Like, in a way, that was the Carton Arc video is like, hey guys,
right?
Like,
it sounds just like that.
Yeah, it's not like me from 8 years ago would absolutely be all for the Carton Arc. I'd collab with him.
Yeah.
I would do the same things. I'd probably up the harassment.
And that's pretty brave too, because most people don't speak out about the Carton Arc because the way he presents is kind of suburban appealing. I mean, the fact that he appealed to me, like the stuff you were making before wouldn't appeal to the average, soccer mom or something.
Right.
But what he does, but it's almost like suburbia has discovered your formula from 8 years ago, and there's people that are starting to do that kind of thing.
Right.
And it is pretty interesting, like hearing you talk about it right now. I guess I'll watch your video, but it's changed my mind. I was already kind of leaning in that direction, at least to some extent, but not, I was probably like 10% down the road, but, just talking with you right now, I'm just like, and you wonder about Sebastian I don't wonder, I know, because I've been watching his stuff for, how long has he been doing this? Like 10 years or something?
Yeah, a long time. He's part of a radio show.
Okay. And I would see his early stuff, and it was way tamer. Now he has a whole shtick, and he has a method of, I think, keeping people engaged. 10 years ago, were there people that became unhinged? Yeah, but it just didn't have the same, what you're identifying that I hadn't really identified for myself is manipulation, a way of tapping into something and making the other person look terrible, and there's probably a lot of stuff out there like that. And it, it'd be an interesting kind of next chapter. I'm not saying you have to do it, but
it was kind of like, in some ways, a soft launch, or like I wonder if people like the temperature check. That's what it was, where it's like, do people, because I have a couple of friends who are like, yeah, I hate that guy. I hate that he does that. And I'm like, I wonder if this is like a common feeling, if I can tap into what makes people frustrated about it. Mm-hmm. So, it's obviously not a big deal one way or the other. But, it's like
but I think
small...
But I think it's a little step in the direction of modeling how to critically evaluate content and our interaction with it, because that's what you just did for me. You because of your experience being in his shoes. It's like you said, I've been there in those shoes. I know how to tweak someone to do something, and of course, you do it to 100 people, and you get 3 of them to flip out. Then you have your video. And
one thing specifically that bothered me with his videos is that you even mentioned it. It's like he does this. He tells them to take their cart backs in the most polite way. And it's like, it's actually like, to me, like, it's kind of aggressive. Like, it would be on paper, if we're in court, it would be polite. But when you hit me with like, I'm your teacher, or I'm an authority figure and I'm telling you, or I'm suggesting to you what to do, like the themes are like very similar to how I was spoken to when I was maybe doing something that I shouldn't in high school or whatever. So it's very obvious why the way he does things is triggering to some people and why they would just go off.
Well, regarding the future, do you have any plans? Do you have any dreams with your content? Because I'm guessing your audience and
Yeah.
a lot of people would want to know what the answer is to that.
Well, I think I was, to bring it back to what we were talking about a little bit, you know how the audience can kind of dictate what you're creating because you get this positive reinforcement. They really like a certain type of video. I think I was going down that route for a while, and I would occasionally make videos to convince myself I can make whatever I want. I'm not a subject. I'm not, subject to my audience in that way. I'm not forced to make content cops. So I'd make ones about like I have this video where I'm like trying to figure out what percentage of peanuts are in the mixed nut things from Planters. A bunch of random videos like that. But I love making
I think
those
at this
videos.
point your channel is mostly those videos, right? Because those are the videos you've left up, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and other just criticisms like Kickstarter projects and stuff. But those types of videos I really had fun making, and they really appealed to people that I've enjoyed talking to in real life. Like when people, will tell me, people that I really respect, the videos that they will mention have never been content cop other than like them wanting to what's the term? Glaze me up, get glazed, whatever it is.
Butter you up?
Yeah, that's it. They all say some of these random videos.
But they don't get as many views, I'm guessing, right?
No, they don't.
And they're not as controversial.
Yeah.
Right?
And I will say when they have gotten good views in the past, but that's kind of only because the curtain wasn't pulled back as much. So
if you made it today, you might experience a different...
Yeah, I don't think it would be as popular. I think people would convince themselves, or at least the old fan base, some of the old fan base would convince themselves that, like, the spark is gone. What made it good is gone.
So kind of you're starting over. Because
yeah, in a way.
You had built this audience that was of a certain point of view, and maybe some of them have come with you. I'm guessing some people have reached out to you and said, yeah, I actually had a similar... or you influenced me to think about it too.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, but there's probably a lot of people that are still in that, going deeper into it. And yeah, it's kind of like just starting over again.
Yeah, it is. And I'm kind of excited for it. I feel like, earlier I had said, like, I really like and admire when I was younger these comedians who are able to, like, figure out how to, like, get away with it kind of thing. And like after doing my apology and taking accountability for these things, I'm like, it actually feels like a lot freer and better to be in the position that I'm in, because it feels like I can make better jokes that like land more. I could give a message that I feel better about, because I'm not specifically doing it for people who think like me. It's more of like, for everyone.
Okay.
Or trying to.
I see. So you're not trying to further a niche political view. You're just trying to be generally entertaining.
Yeah, I'd say so. But I can't, it's really hard for me to not be like kind of controversial or political in some way.
Okay.
It just kind of jazzes me up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of angles that are not the sort of angles that you won't be able to be proud of at the end of your life, know? So
yeah.
So.
Oh, and that's another thing is I have done a few documentaries, and that's definitely like, I want to do more of that because it's a little bit less nasty and polarizing.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Well, Ian, iDubbbz. This conversation enriches me because, as a fellow content provider myself, I've gone down roads and I've been tempted, and I guess because I was older and I'm, to some extent I had guardrails because as a therapist and a professor, I had a professional reputation I had to protect, and so I wonder what would have happened if I didn't have that. There'd be times when, especially earlier on, when I was grinding online for 8 years, losing money and with a very small audience, and then things took off around like 2015 for me, but I mean, very, very slowly. But I wonder if I would have gone down a similar road that, you found yourself going down. But anyway, it enriches my life because a good portion of my life is making content and just hearing your process. And it also, I think the main pleasure for me is that you turned around, and you don't see that very often. The humility and the sipness, if you will.
Yeah.
The ability to say, I was wrong. It really showed in that apology video, And you even said something interesting. You said, I'm not the sort of person that's interesting enough to be entertaining just as I am. So I had to come up with an angle. Mm-hmm. And so that was my angle. And I don't think that's true, and I hope you don't think that's true anymore, because, certainly you have a lot of charm and entertainment value without that shtick. But it feels like the world is a safer place knowing that people like yourself, without any reason, right? You weren't being canceled. Mm-hmm. There was no incentive to what you were giving up. Your audience, you were giving up a lot of future money. You were giving up your reputation. You were going to now incur, people hated you before for what you were doing, and people loved you before because of what you're doing. And the people that hated you before, they're not going to love you now. Right. And the people that loved you are now going to hate you. Everyone's going to hate you. And without any incentive, without any demand on your life, you made the choice to face it and to apologize and to change and to at least try to make yourself accountable and a better person. But also, I wonder how many millions of people actually were pushed a little bit further in that direction, And of course, many people were heavily influenced, but, just think all those people that didn't reach out to you and all those people that just grew up with you and had that realization that emotions matter, that empathy matters, that questioning your assumption of other people's experiences. It's like, well, maybe I don't know the whole story. Maybe I should just listen a little bit more because I don't think of myself as someone that wants to harm other people. It's quite honestly one of the most commendable things, really. It's one thing for me to be generally a good person, but I have always been in that direction. My parents were very good to me and provided for me, and I didn't really have any negative influences or anything. I didn't grow up with the internet. It's easy for me to stay on track because I just had to keep going, but to just completely jump ship, and just throw it all away, like against your own benefit, like that's true altruism right there.
It is, not to shit on your point, but it did make it easier that I had, and I think a lot of people use this as a criticism, I had benefited from that type of rhetoric for so long, making money. So, like, I definitely am not, like, I'm in a comfortable enough position where I could do that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That isn't the motivation, obviously.
But how many people do that is the thing. There's so many examples of people that are still in operation and going further down those roads. Right. And 5-10 years ago, they had reached that point monetarily where they could retire. Mm-hmm. But it's not about the money to them. It's about the power and about the accolades. Right. And I imagine for some of them, they've dug themselves in a hole, and they are too prideful to admit when they're wrong. And you didn't have that really at all. You just, turned the corner. And there was a maybe a number of months where you were really mulling it over, and then one day you just said, fuck it, I'm going to make a video. I'm just going to, stake my claim here and just say, okay, there was me before and now there's me after. What did it feel like to post that video that day?
Oh, man. I felt really good about it. It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because on all these videos that I posted criticizing other people, these content cop videos, I felt sick to my stomach every time I posted them, because it was like, what's going to happen? Like, it's kind of like what you're talking about with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, where it's like, it's just like pity your stomach. Like, I would almost tell myself, like, I'm not going to ever do one of these again, kind of thing.
Wow.
Because it's there. You're firing the gun, and it's,
Well, you could also argue it was against your nature. It was counter to who you are. And when we have that dissonance, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So.
I think if you're being, like, obviously, you're being more of an objective journalist, you can do something like that feeling as if you did the responsible thing. But with a lot of my stuff, it was a lot of my, like, opinion and, like, reaching a little too far, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
So then when you posted that video, the apology video.
It felt great. It felt great. Obviously, there's been, like, major, like, fallout since then, like, just a lot of haters coming out of the woodwork. But I do want to make it, like, clear, because there's a lot of, like random critiques I've seen online, and it's not always coming from the same people, but I've heard that, like you said before, like, a move like this is a grift. It's to make more money somehow. And I just want to make it clear, I'm making less money than I've ever made in my life, basically. And, you could see that as well on the YouTube, like, averaging 1 million views before this move, averaging 200,000 now. So it definitely not a woe is me, but if you're going to make the claim that it's like some financial boon, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were in it for the money, you just would have continued what you're doing, because you would have continued to make money, or just slightly shifted.
Right, because you don't need to announce it. I could easily pivot. That was a criticism that I think Moist Critical gave, which was like, his opinion was like, you can sort of change via your actions and the videos and the content that you produce.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was trying to do like a slow change and a slow pivot. It had been like 2 or 3 years since I made a content cop video, but there were still people every day, because you don't know what each individual person's grind is. Some people were only watching content cop videos that I'd make, and they'd only tune in for that.
Yeah, I don't understand. I think I might have come across that criticism from Moist Critical, and I don't understand that at all. It'd be like if you were very hurtful to your wife, and then you just said, well, I'm not going to apologize. I'm just going to be nice to her from now on. I guess it's like, well, that's good, but that doesn't address what happened. It doesn't indicate that you recognize that you committed a transgression, you know? Yeah, sure. Make up for it, slightly. And maybe that's what he's done, is he's avoided actually coming out and saying, I don't know, like, I don't really stand by what I did before. He's just veered the ship a different direction, you know?
Well, I think a lot of people who have criticized my apology are specifically only coming, like, addressing the apology from the perspective of, like, was this a good strategy?
Right.
For your career, rather than, is this a good life thing to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't really make that distinction. They don't say at the beginning, like, I'm only speaking for, like, the YouTube grind and how you can best maximize longevity and view count, or something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then I made a reaction video, and I just said, it sounds sincere to me, and he's giving a lot of elaboration. He's expressing regret. He's identifying individuals. He seems like he has emotion about this. And because I've been in those shoes and I've made public apologies. You know, there's that point as a content maker where you're just like, well, do I apologize for everything that I do? Because there's always someone that's upset at you. And is that what I want to be doing? Or does that engage the negative element more? Because, you know, you get all these, because, you know, the party line from experts, you know, consultants is you never apologize. Just keep forging ahead. And I'm always thinking, really? And I'll take their word for it. But sometimes I wonder if that comes from their experience, because public figures are so shitty at giving public apologies that it both alienates your true fans and the people you're apologizing to, because the people you're apologizing to are just like, well, that doesn't feel sincere, you know, like a tweet apology or something, you know, whereas what you did, you talked for a long time without editing it, and it was coming off the top of your head. I didn't realize you were in these shoes for 2 to 3 years. It kind of makes sense, given that you could just speak off the top of your head because you've been thinking about it for so long, talking with Anissa and others about it. But anyway, can you take my compliment that you did quite a thing, and you deserve to be pat on the back? And
I'll take that compliment. That's about all, like, I mean, yeah, after all of it, like, I have a clear conscience, and I got a compliment from Kirk Honda, so I'll take it.
And everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Why should people take care of themselves?
Because you deserve it. You really do. Is good?
That's good.
Okay. Whoa, wow.